Hey, this is Professor Homa. Welcome to EX11, your final assignment for this semester. And we're going to be working with a dentist site once again, but I thought you might want to try something different than the Dr. Wiesner site. So we're going to do the Janine E. Weike site. And I did find one online, and this is in the Lehigh Valley. It's somewhere local, but this is the real site at drweike.com. And what we're going to do is recreate it. And it's not that complicated. It has a background image which we haven't used, and it has some navigation at the top, navigation on the side. It has a drop shot on a border, so we're just going to recreate this. But what we are going to do is we're also going to make it responsive, because this site right now, as it is, if you resize it, you can see it basically just gets cut off. So we're going to change that. It basically just gets hidden, and everything is centered in it, and you have to scroll right and left. So if you first viewed it on a phone, everything would just be, a little small resize thing that you'd have to pinch and scroll around. So we're gonna change that a little bit. I worked on one, and here's my recreated version, and it's not exactly the same. And some of the instructions I'll give you, I made the links a little bit bigger so they're easier to read. I made these borders a little thicker so they're not as fine on this one. You can see how the borders are really fine, hard to see on that. Even the type is fairly small on this. On my version, I even put I left underlines under the links so that people know they are links and they're not just bullet points. So I made this a little bit bigger, this a little bit bigger, and at the bottom, I tried to approximate it the way it is at the bottom. This is a little tricky because there's two lines, but one's aligned right, one's aligned left. We basically have two paragraphs, and we have to make a class for that and make the one float to the right and the other float to the left on the same line. So a couple things just to point out on here. There's a container that we're going to use. We don't have everything inside the body, because this thing would be outside the body. If this blue with the border, white border and the shadow and everything were the body, then we'd have stuff outside the body. But we can't do that because everything on our web page is in the body. So anyway, we're going to have a container portion that's going to have a white border, and it'll have a little drop shadow on it. We're going to have a background image. This thing here, you could see the way this moves. There's a background image on it, and that's going to be basically it's one image that repeats, and it's just going to repeat in the x-axis, meaning it's just going to repeat horizontally. It won't repeat down. It won't tile like you've seen background images kind of tile like tiles, but they're not going to tile like that. It's just going to tile across, and you could set that in your CSS. Another thing with this site that I mentioned before, it's responsive. So we're going to get to a certain point. Once it starts to cover it up, it's going to flip and it's going to lose some things. It's going to lose the border. The navigation on the right side is going to go below it down here so that it's kind of almost a single column layout. And we're going to do that so that it responds on a phone or even smaller size monitors. Keep in mind that these media queries do not work on old versions of Internet Explorer, but the whole point we're using them is so they could work on a mobile device. That's the important thing. We're not trying to gear this to every size browser window. If we did, we'd design differently and just use percentages for everything. But we just want to make sure that when people view it on a phone, it looks okay. So that's what we're concerned about. That's kind of our priority. So when it gets down to phone size, I even made this so that I could have made this image scale, and I tried it one time with the image scaling down, but since they have their logo in here, I decided to keep this picture full size and just have it actually get kind of cropped. So the picture gets cropped, but everything else kind of fits in a column. So you don't even see those anymore. You're basically seeing this kind of part, and we scroll down and everything's in kind of a one column view, and we just lose the border, we lose the shadow, and some of the everything changes to kind of percentages a little bit. I think even after it gets to a certain point, I'm even gonna at a small kind of break point, I think at like 400 or something, even these things, because they get kind of odd when they start to break on three lines with these gaps between them. So what I did at a 400 pixel breakpoint, they're all just going to go on one line. They're just going to stack on top of each other. So instead of being inline, they'll then be blocks. So that's kind of what we're going to do. We're going to lay this out, which is not a real complicated layout. It's a lot of CSS, but you guys know how to do the CSS stuff. And then we're just going to throw a media query and adjust some of the properties so that it'll actually lay out nice on a phone. So that's what we're going to do for the last one. I'll supply you with a lot of the HTML. I'll supply you with the CSS, but you'll have to create most of the CSS. I might put a couple things there to start. Just a couple things to be aware of. Here's the code. Remember, here's the index page, the finished version, but keep in mind you're going to use the meta tag, the viewport meta tag. That's the one that actually keeps it from, it helps it scale like on an iPhone. You're going to link to your CSS, which we'll just call EX11 CSS, like some of our other exercises. And then also this shim. Now, again, this shim is just to make older versions read HTML5. It does not help it read media queries. Older versions of IE do not read media queries. But this is so that it knows what nav is and header and some of those HTML5 elements for older versions of Internet Explorer, which not a lot of people are, but there's some businesses that still use them. And then also in your CSS, keep in mind we put this rule up here that make everything display by block by default. And as we go down, there's a lot of CSS here. And hey, it's a final project. And there is, this is where we start the media queries, just like before. And I used a lot of extra asterisks so you could see that. And then there's just a couple things down here, not a whole lot. And a lot of the pixel things get changed to, the pixel amounts get changed to percentages, so it works a little better. So it wasn't that hard, and I'll kind of guide you through it a little. I'll make a video where I kind of go through things very quickly, but I'll try to give you as much as I can so you can kind of get this done, get it set up. Not everything's exactly like the version that's online. You're not going to have to link this thing down here. We'll take the link off of here. On the next video, I'll actually start putting this thing together and working on the CSS and hopefully guiding you through a little bit.